Good afternoon and welcome to Birdland Media Works. I'm your host, Danielle Palli, and today I'm joined by Dr. Roger Landry. Dr. Roger Landry is a preventive medicine physician and the author of the award-winning book Live Long, Die Short, A Guide to Authentic Health and Successful Aging. He is also the president of Masterpiece Living, a group of multidisciplined specialists in the field of aging who partner with organizations to empower older adults to maximize their unique potential and challenge the current perceptions of aging. Trained at Tufts University School of Medicine and Harvard University School of Public Health, Dr. Landry was also a flight surgeon in the Air Force for more than 22 years, keeping pilots and other aircrew healthy and performing at their best. Dr. Landry retired as a highly decorated full colonel and chief flight surgeon at the Air Force Surgeon General's office in Washington, D.C. After duty on 5 continents, Dr. Landry, it is an honor to have you with us today.
Well, the honor's mine, Danielle. You do a great work.
Dr. Landry, can you share with us your role as a flight surgeon in the Air Force and how it prepared you for your current work with Masterpiece Living?
Well, you pretty much hit it on the button during the introduction, where I was tasked with helping aircrew, who are young, healthy people for the most part, keeping them healthy, continue to be healthy, and to perform at their best. And although I did that as individuals, I was also involved in a lot of policy to keep the group, as a group, the Air Force pilot, the Air Force aviator population healthy with policy that would ensure that they showed up at the aircraft in the best possible way they could be. So that was what it's preventive medicine because, again, these people are healthy, and the whole idea was to keep them that way and to prevent illness, or from the Air Force point of view, to prevent them from crashing if they were not in the state of health that they should be that particular day for that particular mission. It was my job to make sure that they never got in that situation, that they were always at their best. And so it's preventive, and it's also something we call population health. And when you look at a population, how can I keep this population healthy? So, it was Air Force pilots and aviators, and at the Surgeon General's office, it was pretty much everyone, both active duty and dependents in the Air Force, that I was tasked with keeping healthy. And so it was just a matter of changing the population. You could change that to kids, or you could change it to older adults, and that's what I eventually ended up doing.
Yeah. Now you spent most of your life as a preventive medicine physician. In that time, what have you learned about what it takes to keep people healthy and aging at their best at any age?
What I've learned, Danielle, is that it's pretty simple, really, and it's not rocket science, and we tend to get a lot of hype and new products and new approaches that people come up with in order to make a mark, or to frankly, sometimes just to make a living and to make money. But the fact is, it really goes back to who we are as humans, as core humans, as creatures. We are beings who are meant to move a lot, and if we want to be able to have something working for us, we have to use it. So our muscles, our brain. We're also very social creatures. Our ancestors only survived because we banded together, and we're social creatures. And we're creatures who are meant to not be idle, in the sense that not only not doing something, but to not have a purpose, a reason to get out of bed in the morning. We're beings who need that. So anything that we do to keep ourselves moving, to keep ourselves learning new things in particular, to be socially connected and to have meaning and purpose, anything we do to foster those 4 traits is going to work very well for us and keep us healthy.
Okay, it's good advice. Now, an important mission of Masterpiece Living is to challenge the perception of aging. Now, what's the current misconception that society has about our aging population?
Well, I think our society, and we're almost unique with this actually, is that we kind of treat our older adults like old racehorses. We turn them out to pasture and feel that they really don't have a purpose. And we're a youth-oriented society, and this has particularly taken hold over the last 50 to 75 years in our country. And with the demographic shifting, with so many people right now 10,000 a day turning 65, that this gets to be a big problem. Ageism in our country is something that probably is based back to the Industrial Revolution, 250, 300 years ago, when it was all about production. And so older adults couldn't produce quite as well, so we put them off to the side, and I like to say we pasteurized them like horses. And with that came this whole idea, especially as we're a fast-growing, more and more high-tech society, there's a feeling that older adults just can't keep up the pace, or they don't know the technology, or they're just not as productive. Realize that every society prior to the Industrial Revolution, and now more and more societies in Europe and certainly Third World, they don't treat their older adults this way. They revere them. They feel that they have a lot to offer with their experience and their wisdom, and they seek their guidance. They don't necessarily need them to produce, but they need them to guide. And we're falling very short on that, and we're out in Masterpiece Living to make sure that that's something that's just not going to continue to grow. In fact, it's going to go the other way, and we want to get rid of it.
Yeah, and I heard you talk live recently at a community where you said that in other countries, older adults are considered cultural treasures, and you said, how many people feel like a cultural treasure? And like not a single hand went up, and they started laughing because, that's not the way we view older adults in this country.
Yeah, humor is associated a lot with aging, and it's sort of a black humor. Because I think older adults themselves laugh about it because they don't know what else to do, and they feel trapped or in a position where they can't do anything about it. And younger people, I believe, have a fear of growing older, and to the extent that they can make jokes about it, it's not them, it's someone else. It's very destructive because, as I said, older adults need meaning and purpose, and what they have to offer to the society, the human capital that comes with this ever-growing group of people with experience and wisdom who are survivors, and have faced life's curveballs that come and have been resilient and kept going. These are people who we want to be advising us in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to insert a little humor here. You told me a story of how you once stuck your foot in the mouth when talking to Chuck Yeager. This was your first lesson in ageism. Can you share that story with us?
Well, I was lucky to get it. Chuck Yeager, as you know, is the first man to go faster than the speed of sound, break the sound barrier. And in the Air Force, he walked into my office one day for a physical, and I was, of course, in awe. And he was sharing with me his stories, and at one point he said, this was back in the 80s, he was in his late 50s at the time, and he said, I think on the 50th anniversary of breaking the sound barrier, I'm going to do it again. And, I was a young whippersnapper, and I was so fortunate to get this lesson so early in my life. Perhaps it's why I'm where I am today and fighting ageism. Because his response, my response was, but you'll be 73 years old then, Chuck. And he looked at me and he bore into me with his laser eyes and said, what's your point? And my goodness, what was my point? My point was, hey, that's a number, and associated with that number, inextricably associated, is decline, inability to do things like go faster than the speed of sound or fly an airplane. And certainly that has been challenged by individuals and more people every day. We had John Glenn going into space. We have people doing things we never thought possible. But rather than to be individual stories that are, say, oh, wow, look at this older person is still doing something, I want it to be mainstream. Right. That's expected. That's not a big surprise if someone takes care of themselves and want to continue to grow and to challenge themselves and to see life as an adventure. They're going to do that normally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to be somebody run a race, without saying, and they're 103. So what? They won the race. That's the thing to focus on.
Exactly.
Yeah. So over the last couple of weeks, I'm just going to share some comments that I heard from people either directed at themselves or someone else. I'm too old for that. You must be getting senile in your old age. She looks great for her age. 60 is the new 40, and wow, he didn't age well at all. How dangerous is it for people to buy into these negative stereotypes of aging?
Well, it's very dangerous. I've forgotten who said it, but basically this person said, why would you knock? Why would you denigrate? Why would you make fun of something that you are going to become if you're lucky?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense, but it does when we're youth-oriented. Superficiality of how we look, those sort of things are more important than the substance of a person, and that still is pretty rampant in our society, particularly in the media, and a fear of getting older, because we have the view that aging is only about decline and losing your ability and having people have to take care of you. It's not that those things don't happen. They do. Yeah. But the fact is that much of that doesn't have to be that way. The worst ageism, the worst reservoir, I think, of ageism we have are older adults themselves, because they have grown up in a world, 70, 80, 90 years of hearing things that essentially point to getting older as something that's just horrible, something you don't want. It's about decline only. So naturally, they fear it, and younger people fear it. Younger people feel, I know I did when I was young, that this is another world, and they just don't really think about getting older, and therefore can, I guess, make jokes and talk the way they do at times, because they feel it's for the other person. It's like dying. We all feel everyone else is going to die, and maybe we may admit in public that we're going to die, but down deep, many of us don't really buy into it. Something. Are we really? And I think aging is something like that. So it's very dangerous, and I believe that it's based upon a lack of knowledge of all that we have learned about aging. That how we age is determined mostly by the choices we make in our lifestyle, up to 70%. And again, how much we move and learn and stay socially connected and have meaning and purpose, it just blows all of these statements right out of the water, because they just make them so incorrect and not appropriate for anyone who pays attention to their aging journey.
Yeah, and it's funny because we're all aging. We're kind of all in the boat together, and yet ageism seems to go unchallenged in our culture. And you talked about it a little bit, but why do you think it's the one prejudice that is still acceptable? Is it because people fear of death, and if they can make jokes about it, it's not really going to happen to them? Or what do you think it is?
I think that's part of it. I think it's one of the injustices that hasn't been challenged yet. I don't know why it hasn't. Race, gender, cruelty, child labor, all these things have been ultimately challenged and therefore brought into the light of day. And when you shine a spotlight on some of these things, and you shine a spotlight on the research or the negative impact of these things, then you become more aware as a society, and then it's less acceptable. With age, I think, although this is fairly new for us, this whole idea of older adults is not valuable. And again, this is only, you've heard me speak, Danielle, that if we were to say the whole time man has been on Earth was a year, we've only been acting this way for about the last 2 days or so, since the Industrial Revolution. And it has become deeply ingrained, I think, primarily because of, we could say social media now, but for when I was young, it was really the marketing, advertising industry, very youth-oriented, because it was all done by boomers for boomers, and now you'd think it would be changing because the boomers are turning 65 at 10,000 a day.
Right.
But I believe that it is something deeply ingrained yet new. And I think that, like the other injustices or inaccuracies of our society, and we're in Masterpiece Living, and what you do with us and what you do in your social media work is to just shine that spotlight on this and show how not only inaccurate but unjust, and cruel, actually, that it really is. I think that the more we start thinking in terms of the golden rule, this is going to be me. How do I want to be treated? And how do I want people to talk about me? Surely we all laugh at our conditions, especially particularly in medicine, when we see people who are very sick, and yet many of them respond to it with humor. And humor is a great way to manage something that is a challenge and could otherwise just cause us to slide down a slope of decline. And humor can help, and we know humor can keep us healthy. And so humor about this is not bad. Mm-hmm. But when that humor is consistent and dark and tends to perpetrate some inaccuracies, then it becomes more destructive. Yeah. I think that if people were to substitute being old for any other condition, being mm-hmm. black, being African American, being a woman in a workplace, being handicapped, I think if you were to put older adult or an aging term in there, it would suddenly come to light that, hey, I would never say anything like that. And yet it's a little more tolerated now. But it's going away. We're making sure of it, Danielle, with what we're doing right now.
That's actually a really good litmus test. Just take out the word old and put something else in, like, I'm too much of a woman for that. I don't know. I'm too Jewish. I'm too Christian for that.
Exactly.
I'm too Mexican for that. And it's like you wouldn't accept that at all. But you can say I'm too old for that, and nobody thinks anything of it. So it's a really good test.
I think you nailed it. And, we're new at this. I mean, you'd think that, again, you'd think this has been around forever as long as people have been aging. But no, we're not. This is new. It was a phenomenon of the 20th century, primarily. Prior to that, and we still see it in the blue zones that you mentioned, where people age in a much better way, and that they're their cultural treasures, and they move and they learn and they're socially connected. And so we're going to see, and I know that my peers in the boomer generation, as I'm sure many of the millennials all feel, I'm going to age in a different way, and I'm learning how I have to do that, namely, keeping moving and learning and staying connected and having meaning and purpose. And so as we learn that, as young people, perhaps in kindergarten we should be teaching it, that your aging journey can be much different than the popular narrative right now, the negative narrative about it, because it's really mostly up to you.
Yeah, and I think it's very liberating personally. I'm 45 and I've gone through several career changes, and I've got like 2 more planned ahead. And, it used to be, they think, okay, after 30, if you haven't found your direction, that's it. And now I know so many people in their 70s and 80s who are finding a new career that they just never had a chance to explore before. So I think of it as an amazing potential in our future.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you are over the tasks of raising children or even making a living, and you're over the tyranny of your youth, the striving for competence and mm-hmm. and respectability, and you get older, and those things you've achieved them or you've not, but they don't matter anymore. And now you're liberated, just as you say, to follow your dream, to follow something that really is meaningful to you, to give back, to share your wisdom and experience. In fact, the recent surveys show that the decade where people are happiest mm-hmm. right now is the 8th decade. People in their 70s. Mm-hmm. These are the happiest. This is the happiest decade. And let's face it, most of them are facing some sort of physical challenge, and they've lost a lot in life by that time, friends, and maybe even some physical ability. But yet they're happy, and I think it's exactly for the reasons that you're talking about.
Yeah, and that I can think about it in my own life. I liked it in my 20s when I was a little thinner, had a little more muscle tone. But as far as like the angst and some of the just emotional stuff that you have to learn through time and through experience, I wouldn't want to go back there. So I feel happy now. I'm looking forward to that happiness curve in my 80s. Not that I'm rushing it, but
No, as well you should. Well, you're also an old soul. I work with you all the time, Danielle, and I know that to be true. And just working in this area and hearing what the research is telling us, it has to have an effect on us, so that we're much more correct and much more sanguine and positive about this whole journey that we're having. Aging is a privilege. Yeah. Let's face it. I mean, so many of my peers didn't make it, and so I consider it a privilege that I'm not going to waste. And I'm with you. I'm ready for new challenges and trying new things, and that is exactly what will keep me going, and it's exactly what I want to do. So there's a good match there.
Yeah. Now, you're a huge advocate of changing public policy with respect to older adults, and have been quoted as saying, "Our older adult population is the solution to many of the problems our society faces." Can you tell us what you mean by that?
You bet. Well, if you hear the talk in Washington lately, as our population ages, soon every fifth person will be over 65, in less than 20 years. And so Washington is wringing their hands and talking about entitlements and talking about what this means, and older adults are considered like accounts payable, a burden. And yet, as I said, almost all cultures previous to a couple hundred years ago all considered this a cultural treasure, as we've been talking about. This is something you hope for as a society, to have someone who would guide you. Now, I've learned in preventive medicine that the huge gains, I can sit in an office, or I can talk to groups or individuals and say smoking, and say, smoking is bad, it's not a good idea, but we didn't see major change in smoking until we were able to have public policy on it. When we learned that people who didn't smoke but were subjected to secondhand smoke could be injured. And then we became much more motivated to make policy to protect those people, workers, bartenders, people in buildings and airplanes even, where they used to smoke. And so that public policy has resulted in the most dramatic decrease in smoking over the last few decades that we had ever seen, significantly made changes. So we in preventive medicine know that that we have to, first of all, have data and be able to make a very strong case for whatever we feel is in the best interest of the population to age in a better way and to be healthy. But you're not going to do that, especially in this environment, unless you have a very, very strong case for it. And it can't be just a passionate case and a passionate argument. It has to be data. And so that's why, as you know, in Masterpiece Living for the last 15 years, we have been collecting data. We have over 2 million data points, and that's still not enough. But we're going to continue to grow that database and show what we have shown, that just give people the opportunity to be able to walk more without safely. Give them time to cross the street. Give them bike paths so they can use bikes. Not have policies that pasteurize older adults, but that seek them out as mentors and advisors, and put them together with the young generation. Have intergenerational contact. Make that much more easier to do than it is today, and engage these older adults. And when you do, you're going to have all that human capital that now is essentially being wasted, the wisdom and experience, and you're going to engage it into our society. And it's going to happen because we're aging, and when every fourth or fifth person is over 65, we're going to have to do this as a society.
Exactly. We don't have a choice anymore.
I kind of want to have it happen a lot sooner, because maybe I'm just it's self-serving. No, it is. But I feel very strongly about this. This is extremely extremely wasteful. Financial people talk about capital, and capital is to be used, and this is human capital, and we must use it. And the way we're going to get that done is to have enlightened public policy.
Yeah. What is the first step we can take toward changing public policy?
Well, like most things, Danielle, I think it begins with each one of us. I believe that our language, our views, our interactions with older adults, and if you're an older adult, with younger adults, that's the beginning. You start to communicate, you have a dialogue, and you get rid of misconceptions just by interacting and communicating. And, if we were to have a widespread movement for that would be huge. But I think as I said, we need cogent, very compelling arguments, and so we need to attack and destroy those misconceptions and those myths of aging that are just blatantly untrue and lead to a negative view of aging and a negative management of our older population, and that, namely pasteurizing them and not engaging them more. So it's a two-pronged thing. Us as individuals, to make sure that we're not going to be the perpetrator of negative language or negative views of aging, that we do our best to learn more about older adults or younger adults if we're older adults, and with that to live our lives that way, while people like you and I, Masterpiece Living, and so many others now, particularly as the population is aging, that we're highly motivated to develop these compelling arguments with lots of data, and it's just consistent. The messages and the data, what the research tells us about aging, that how we age. I wrote the book, as you said, Live Long, Die Short, that it is possible for us to do that, namely to not suffer long, chronic, decade-filled decline that's expensive and degrading and painful, and that since lifestyle is the major determinant, if we move, learn, be socially connected, and have meaning and purpose, that is a beginning, as a core of being able to stay at our highest level of functioning until our time's up, and then metaphorically just fall off a cliff, or, like I say in the book, like a leaf, getting more colorful and blending with others, and then falling off the tree when your time comes.
I think I like the leaf analogy better than falling off a cliff. I think I'll turn into a leaf.
Okay. Less dramatic, huh?
Well, I want to let everybody know listening that they can find out more about you by visiting livelongdieshort.com, and the book is Live Long, Die Short, A Guide to Authentic Health and Successful Aging. Dr. Landry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Danielle, it's always a pleasure working with you. Thank you for the opportunity.